A Sergeant Brant wakes up from his evening nap and immediately hears a noise from a group of boys outside. Peeping through the window, he sees them surrounding a car with no good intentions and decides to step out and intervene. He interrupts their burglary attempt, but the boys, thinking he's just an ordinary passerby, gang up and even try to rob him. What they get instead is a smash as Brant hits one with a hurley. He gives each and every one of them a good beating, leaving them regretting their life mission, before walking away. However, just as things are in a corrupt place, the story is twisted in the newspapers, painting Brant as a maniac. The force sends him for questioning by a therapist, who lists several charges against him over the past year. Brant doesn't answer any of the questions, but threatens the doctor, saying this is the only job he can do. If he's put out, he's sure he'll do something truly reckless. At the precinct, Agent Falls confides in Brant, admitting she failed the sergeant exam. Brant reminds her that she's only been out of rehab for a few months, advising her to give it time. Superintendent Brown storms in angrily and interrupts their chat, sending Falls away. He throws the newspaper on the desk, but Brant is tired of the false narrative. Brown feels the bad publicity isn't what the station needs at the moment, but Brant explains the scene to him, asking him to imagine if it were him. Knowing Brant's actions were justified, Brown asks him to keep a low profile until the situation blows over, before leaving. Afterward, Brant heads to a funeral to support his friend, Inspector Roberts, whose wife has passed. Later, they spend time drinking together in a bar. Slightly drunk, Roberts notices that the urn is no longer on the table, making Brant think someone must have stolen it. This draws a serious fit of laughter from Roberts, who hasn't laughed in a while, and Brant is also infected by it. Unfortunately, that evening, horror strikes when a man who hates cops shoots Sandra, a cop, in the neck, leaving her in a pool of her own blood. At home, Brant is contacted and told about it. He is needed at the scene, but instructed not to talk to any journalists. At the scene, Brown asks for updates, and Brant shares that there was a witness. He is instructed to take the statement, while Sandra is bagged up. Brant meets up with the witness at the bar, and the man thinks Brant is a legend for his sense of discipline. Finally, someone who sees the light. Brant asks him to describe what he saw, making the man wonder if he isn't going to take any notes. Well, Brant doesn't look like someone who carries a pencil. The next morning, Sergeant Porter Nash from the West London branch arrives at the precinct and is allocated a locker, as ordered by Brown. In a meeting afterward, Brown appoints him as acting inspector and temporary head of the inquiry, since Roberts is on extended leave. The officers aren't pleased, wondering why one of their own wasn't promoted instead. Brown reminds them that the precinct is already the focus of the media, and besides, Nash will instill a level of professionalism they lack. At home, Falls gets a visit from John, a teenager, who looks extremely scared. He explains that he and his crew may have ended the life of someone, and he doesn't know what to do. Falls promises to look into it, but warns that if the guy is indeed gone, he's on his own, and she would even be the one to arrest him herself. She instructs him to go back home and wait for a word from her, and also tells him he needs to make the right choices. At the precinct, she asks Brant for help with the issue, and he shares that a DI, Craig Stokes, who he knows from way back, would be able to help. Meanwhile, Dunlop, a reporter on the criminal division, gets a call from a guy claiming to have information about the police killings. However, it seems it might be the culprit himself, as he threatens to start on journalists after he finishes his cop quota. This gets Dunlop's attention, but the guy feels Dunlop isn't up to the task of reporting from inside the killings. He bets he can make Dunlop famous and asks him to choose between the numbers 7 and 8. Dunlop picks 8, but before he can confirm what exactly it means, the killer reveals that it means he has 8 more cops to terminate, and drops the call. Another cop is shot in broad daylight, leaving people around devastated. Later, Nash brings Brant a cup of tea and a biscuit, wanting to know if there's any bad blood between them. Brant has no problem with him since he doesn't care for the promotion anyway. It means less paperwork for him. Everyone in the precinct begins working hard on finding the serial killer, tracing the bullet to a gun sold at a gym. Brant goes to question the owner, but the man claims he has no information about the buyer. At a restaurant, Brant meets up with Radner, a possible witness, but Radner wants money before he talks. Instead of gaining finances, Radner almost gets his feet crushed by Brant, and even ends up spending his own money to pay for Brant's drink. Brant tells him to talk, and he reveals that a guy at the Peacock Gym set a police dog on fire and uploaded it on YouTube. When asked why, he only said it was practice. Brant isn't impressed, because they get several kinds of calls from citizens, claiming they've seen several things. Radner doesn't even know the guy's name, making Brant decide to go to the gym to ask the manager. He stands up to leave, but Radner is still in disbelief about getting no money. Brant feels the burger he's left with should be enough for him and walks out. At least he can feed his belly since he can't feed his pockets. Later that evening, Brant pays Nash a visit at home and jokingly mocks his choice of dinner. Nash wonders why he's come out of the blue, and Brant admits he needs his advice. He reveals he's losing his mind, blanking out enough to be worried. It's a huge effort to drag himself out of bed, and he just stares at the wall doing absolutely nothing. Nash feels it's a result of burnout, telling him his brain is on meltdown. A couple of days doing nothing would help him recover. Nash has been there himself, so he knows what he's talking about. Brant is skeptical, and Nash decides to share his experience back in West London. They had a pedophile on the loose who was luring children into his car. Though they knew who he was, they couldn't catch him in the act, and the kids were too traumatized to identify him. He was a big showbiz agent with major connections. He treated Nash badly in every way because he was queer, which put Nash under tremendous pressure, until Nash snapped and broke into the pedophile's house, smashing his groin with a baseball bat. After taking a leave, he was then transferred to the precinct. Brant begins snoring just then, making Nash realize that his heart pouring had only been a bore to Brant, or more like a lullaby. The next morning, Nash pours Brant a cup of coffee when he wakes up, and Brant jokingly asks if he had an affair with him. Following the joke, Nash replies he held back, and Brant gives him the details of the killer they're looking for. He'll be heading back to the house address he got from the gym and agrees for Nash to meet him there in half an hour. Before leaving, Brant compliments Nash as a good cop, making Nash smile gratefully. Meanwhile, Roberts is fed up with his leave and wants to work again. He tells Brown this, but Brown doesn't think it's a good idea. However, when he mentions the extramarital affair Brown is having and insists he just needs to work, Brown agrees. Nash and Brant arrive at the address and begin knocking, interrupting the killer who's busy with his little member. When he finally opens the door, Nash shows him his ID, and Brant barges inside and begins looking through. His name is Barry Weiss, and Brant feels like he knows him. Brant brings up his YouTube video, but Barry claims he just posted it and wasn't actually involved, swearing that he loves animals. Nash wonders if he feels the same for cops, and he mockingly swears so. Brant eventually remembers where he knows him from, realizing he had beaten him to the point of hospitalization the previous year for something he did. After Brant and Nash leave, Barry says they will wait and see. Outside, Radner looks at Barry's building from a corner and sees Brant and Nash coming out. Barry begins packing into a bag and also comes out a few minutes later, and Radner notices this. Barry heads to a parking lot and puts his bag in the trunk of a car, while Radner goes through Barry's trash and sees some things in transparent bags. Later, Roberts heads home on foot, unaware that Barry is cycling behind, following his every turn. When he gets to his apartment, he takes the elevator, and Barry arrives just in time to see which floor he's going to. He gets into the elevator and knocks on Roberts' door, pretending to be from the satellite company. Roberts opens, confused since he's paid his bill, but Barry pulls out his gun. Roberts' police instinct kicks in, and he begins scuffling with Barry. After some tense moments of struggling, Roberts manages to pull out a hammer and tries using it, but Barry bites off his finger, gaining control of the hammer. He then strikes it on Roberts' head, not stopping until life leaves him. Looking at the mess he's made, he gets sick and throws up on Roberts. Afterward, he sits watching a show and eating popcorn like it's just another day, while Roberts lies lifeless on the floor. He then showers, changes into Roberts' clean clothes, and rummages through the apartment, taking some of his things. Done with his mission, he sets the place on fire and leaves nonchalantly. The emergency unit arrives to put out the fire, and Dunlop receives a call from Barry, who tells him where he'll find cop number 3, explaining the new method he used to end his life. Dunlop manages to get the call on record, but Barry calls back, revealing he has a name now. He calls himself Blitz, and Dunlop quickly writes it down, rushing off excitedly for the big story. Barry drives back to the parking lot, opens another car trunk, and secretly stashes the bag he took from Roberts' home. Later, Nash is shown the newest edition of the papers, where the killer has been named Blitz, with Roberts reported as the latest victim. Brant comes in afterward, and Nash, full of tension, wonders where he's been. He breaks the news to Brant, leaving him in disbelief. Nash feels the killer is targeting the station, explaining how Roberts was eliminated and how the killer got in touch with Dunlop for publishing. Nash has already sent a team to the publishing company to tap his phone and trace calls. Turns out Brant knows Dunlop. While stepping out of the station, they encounter Dunlop and other reporters, and Brant reveals to Nash that Dunlop is the one who uploaded his picture alongside the twisted story in the papers. Meanwhile, Radner finds the car Barry stashed in the parking lot, opens the trunk, and finds a gun inside the bag. Making sure no one is watching, he takes it and closes the trunk. The next morning, Dunlop gets a call from Radner, who reveals he knows the cop killer's name, but he wants $50,000 in cash before he spills anything. He also has some items Dunlop would be interested in, but payment comes first. Later, Brant and Nash head over to the morgue, and the coroner gives them what they salvaged from Roberts' belongings. Due to the fire, there is no usable DNA, but Brant notices a cloth with the Peacock Gym logo. He immediately calls to check if Roberts was ever a member of the gym. Meanwhile, Falls comes out of her apartment to find John outside. She isn't pleased since she told him to stay home and assures him she's trying to sort things out. She then meets up with Stokes, who shares that it's an assault case. Apparently, the man is still alive. They begin talking about John, who's known as Metal, on the streets. Stokes feels he's a thug, but Falls believes he's just a scared boy. She asks if he can do anything about the case, and Stokes suggests a meetup for drinks later that night. Typical man behavior. At the station, an officer reports back to Brant saying Roberts was never a member of the gym. He asks her to help with the system, and they bring up Barry's information from the database. It turns out Barry has had loads of offenses, but nothing major. Radnor calls Dunlop, who tells him he's managed to get the money. Radnor then gives him the parking lot location, and they drive there together. Rushing to the car, Radnor opens the trunk and shows Dunlop the trophies stored inside. Unknowing to them, Barry arrives just then and watches from a corner. Having shown enough, Radnor tells Dunlop it's time for the money, and they both drive out. Barry then hurries to the car, removes the items from the bag, and stashes them in another. In a bar, Dunlop hands over the cash to Radnor, who goes to count it in the restroom. Seeing the money, he feels like a genius, but that feeling turns to pure horror when Barry walks in. Feeling guilty, Radnor confesses that he hasn't given up his name yet, probably hoping it might ease Barry's conscience. Barry wonders how he caught onto him, and Radnor reveals he got his address from the gym, along with everything else he's done since then. Pulling him by the hair, Barry leads him into one of the stalls and dunks his head in the toilet, drowning him, before taking the money and walking away. Soon after, the incident is reported and the police arrive. Brant asks the bartender for a drink, but the man makes the mistake of saying they're closed. Brant bullies him into serving him, then heads out without paying since the bartender said they were closed. Dunlop tells Brant and Nash how he found Radnor, but Brant notes that the bartender said he was inside for 10 minutes and didn't come out straight away. Dunlop confesses he was looking for the company's money he paid Radnor in exchange for an exclusive. Brant and Nash are both in disbelief, and Nash reminds him that people's lives are at stake. Dunlop remembers the car and tells them what he saw stashed in the trunk. He gives them the parking lot address, and they leave. As expected, Barry has already moved the things, so when they open the trunk, there's nothing incriminating. They try to obtain the CCTV disc, but the nonchalant attendant tells them the discs are full and nothing has been recorded for 6 weeks. They are frustrated by the man's attitude, but it changes nothing. Later that evening, Falls enjoys some alone time at home, drinking, smoking, and dancing. She then heads to a restaurant to meet Stokes, unaware of Barry's watchful presence outside. At the station, Brant goes through Barry's information again and realizes Sandra was the arresting officer for one of his offenses. A female officer sees him struggling with the system and comes to help, and he tells her he's trying to sort out all the arresting officers on Barry's record. When she learns Sandra was the first, she's shocked. Stokes drives Falls home after their date, and they both lean toward each other after staring for a moment. But while Falls expects a kiss, Stokes' intent is just to open her door. He tells her he'll call her the next day, but Falls isn't having it since that's every man's line. He insists he really will, but she rushes out in anger. Brant and the officer discover the next arresting officer, realizing it was the second cop who was shot, followed by Roberts. The next in line turns out to be Falls. It's clear Barry is targeting all the officers who ever arrested him. Brant rushes off, telling the officer to send an armed dispatch unit to Falls' apartment. Falls can't find her keys, and Brant's call comes in just then. Before she can pick up, Barry swings at her from behind, but she barely dodges and they begin struggling. John runs in and tries prying Barry off Falls. Unfortunately, Barry smashes his head, ending his life, before fleeing in disbelief at what just happened. Falls rushes to John, crying out when she sees he's gone. The police arrive just then, sealing the place as a crime scene. Nash tells Brant that Falls has been sedated and she couldn't see the killer's face. All she knows is that he's big and white. Brant knows for sure it's Barry. Stokes rushes in asking what happened, and they tell him Falls is alive, but the boy isn't. When they learn he was on a date with Falls, Nash scolds him for not walking her to the door like a gentleman. Barry hails a taxi and arrives at a hotel, where he drinks and indulges himself. Falls wakes up to find Brant beside her bed, and she asks about John. Putting it straight, he tells her the boy is gone, and asks what kind of relationship they had for him to risk his life for her. She shares that she's known him since he was 12, telling the story of how he's always been there. She only wanted to help him, but now she feels she's the reason he's dead, breaking into tears while Brant consoles her. Afterward, Brant and Nash head to Barry's house, but he's already left, and they find nothing incriminating. Nash suggests going public with him, and Brant agrees. His picture is printed as the prime suspect for Blitz, and the story is aired on TV. Brant, Nash, and an armed team soon track him down to the hotel, but when they open his room, they find nobody. Barry is already on the run, and the officers immediately rush to pursue. Seeing Barry escape by jumping the building, Brant gives a hot pursuit, entering the busy road full of vehicles. The police chopper follows the race from above, reporting the turns Barry is taking. Nash and some attack team maneuver in police cars, trying to catch up with Barry. Brant chases him all the way to a train depot, and the chopper reports this, making Nash direct all units, instructing them not to let Brant engage. Barry hides under a train, tracking Brant's legs where he can see them. Brant eventually spots him, and Barry freezes since there's nowhere else to run. The other officers arrive with Nash, and just as Brant goes to beat the demon out of Barry, the officers stop him, arresting Barry and taking him away. Nash tries to calm Brant down, assuring him they've gotten Barry. In the station, Falls sees the news of Barry's arrest, and the memory of how John was eliminated runs through her head. She then heads over to the spot John used to hang out with his friends and bumps into a man. When the two boys see her, they throw the drugs and take off, but she retrieves it from the trash. Back home, she looks at the powder, but drops it and takes a drink instead. Brant and Nash go to interrogate Barry, but he smugly demands a lawyer and a sandwich. When the lawyer arrives, he gives them 48 hours to either charge or release Barry. Feeling on top of the world, Barry whispers something to the lawyer, who in turn tells Brant and Nash that Barry wants a different sandwich. If looks could really kill, Barry would be buried just by the looks Brant and Nash give him. They report back to Brown, explaining how Barry has managed to clear all evidence. Nothing is tying the murders to him, and the witness who saw the first murder is already scared, saying he can't make a positive ID, same for the bartender. They need something solid and quick, otherwise Barry will walk out of the station with just a caution. Meanwhile, Falls is unable to resist the temptation of the drugs and soon makes a call to revert to her old ways. Brant and Nash meet in the bar for a drink, and Brant considers the option of them not proving anything, and Barry walking off. Nash wonders where he's going with that lead, and Brant reminds him of the pedophile story he told him. Guess Brant was listening after all. Nash couldn't convict the culprit, so he took him out himself. Nash isn't comfortable with the conversation, saying he doesn't like where it's headed before leaving. Afterward, Brant goes to talk to Barry, telling him he would admit to what he did if he was smart. Barry tries playing innocent, but Brant calls him out. He knows the whole thing stemmed from the incident at the pool table when the officers tried to arrest him. Barry beat them up, making Brant step in and give him the beating he never forgot. Brant tells him how they all laughed at him in the station, reminding him he's nothing. When he leaves, Barry just sits there, stewing in anger at being reduced to nothing. He's then taken out and locked in a room. In a club, Stokes learns that Falls is ripping off drug dealers. Afterward, he calls Brant for help, and Brant arrives to meet him standing outside Falls' apartment. When Brant kicks the door in, he finds Falls high on drugs with a man, blaring loud music. The man is dragged out of the apartment, and Falls is dragged to the bathtub, as Brant douses her with cold water from the shower spray. After a while, she gets herself back, and he gives her some medicine to take. She admits she's messed up, realizing that she wasn't just an undercover cop pretending to be a junkie during her last assignment, but is just a junkie pretending to be a cop. She knows Barry will get away with it, wondering what good they are as cops if they can't protect their own. The next morning, Barry is unfortunately released from jail due to lack of evidence, and he whispers to Brant, saying he will see him some other time. He then walks out towards the paparazzi gathered, enjoying the fame and attention. The police are helpless to do anything, so they just watch him leave. Later that evening, the police follow him discreetly. Stokes stays behind in Falls' apartment, and he tells her Brant and the other cops have gone for Robert's funeral. Meanwhile, in his apartment, Barry takes out the bag he stashed Robert's personal items. The funeral service is held, and Robert's coffin is placed into the ground. Guess who comes crashing the service a few minutes later? No other person than Barry, wearing the complete uniform of Robert. He joins the cops, lowering his head. Just then, Brant gets a ping from his phone and leaves the funeral. Barry, who's come to take his revenge on Brant, immediately follows. Brant drives off, and Barry follows suit, careful not to get spotted. Checking on the officers at Barry's house, Brant learns that Barry hasn't left the apartment. The officers couldn't be more wrong. Barry follows Brant all the way to a building where he takes out his gun and hurriedly goes inside after Brant. Just as he reaches the top floor, he calls out to Brant, ordering him to turn around while he aims at his head. To his uttermost surprise, the person he sees is Nash, and Brant appears from nowhere, hitting Barry with a medal. Turns out it was a trap set by Brant and Nash. Brant beats Barry till he's weak and bloodied, and Barry threatens to sue. Nash passes the gun to Brandt, and the smirk instantly wipes from Barry's face as he tells Brandt he can't kill him since he's the Blitz. Brandt lets him know that's not the case, and he's innocent since he wasn't convicted. Rather, the Blitz go about hunting cops, just like the uniform Barry is wearing, and he uses a weapon just like the gun Brandt is holding. With that said, Brandt fires at Barry's head, ending his pathetic life. They then bag up the weapons, leaving the scene, and Brandt smugly tells Nash that it's likely the case won't be solved. Well, there's no better way to solve the case. Afterward, Brandt tracks down Dunlop and releases 2 ferocious dogs on him. As always, revenge is best served cold. If you've made it to the end, hit the like button, comment, and share. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next recap.